Right, let's have a quick recap then of audit evidence. ISA 500, not that you ever need to know the ISA numbers, but just in case you're interested really. But you should know this, that we need sufficient and appropriate evidence. So sufficient means the quantity, have enough. Appropriate, make sure it's relevant and reliable. And you have to balance those two out all the time, as we'll see later. So the sorts of things you want to be thinking about in terms of gathering evidence is you can physically inspect something. So, for example, go and count the inventory. You can look at documents, for example, look at invoices. You can get third-party confirmations, such as a bank letter. You can do analytical procedures, basically ratios, isn't it? And you can re-perform the calculations that the client's done, like redoing depreciation, something like that. So there's a little list. So if you ever get a question about evidence, if you just think of those 5 things, you'll always come up with good tests. So what I want to talk about now is the balance between these two. So internally generated versus external, ideally you'd want all external, but you can't get all external. It takes forever, might not even be possible. So you've got to balance it out with externally generated and internally generated. Internal meaning the client's done it, external means you've got it from the bank or whatever. Obviously external is more reliable, but we have to balance it out. Direct versus indirect. So when we're gathering information, we'd rather we gathered it ourselves personally rather than the client gathering it for us. So direct wins that time in terms of reliability. But again, we can't do everything ourselves. So sometimes we have to have indirect gathering. And so it's always this balance between the two. So when you've got receivables, the first thing you do, you say, well, external wins and direct wins. So we'll directly ask the customer, who's an external party, so that wins, that's ideal. But what if they don't reply? Well, then we go and check post-year-end cash. So now we're no longer looking at external, we're now going internal, checking the post-year-end cash to see if that's arrived. Okay, moving on then. Professional scepticism. We need that when we're looking at have we got enough evidence. So a question in mind, and always alert to times when there might be potential material misstatements. Often when the directors get a bonus if something happens, then they're more likely to make that thing happen even if it never did. So things like optimistic forecasts. So you've got to be alert to possible material misstatements. You've got to have a question in mind. So you go and compare that. Well, what's the rest of the industry doing? What's the trends like? Have you got contradictory information? If you have, that's when you want to be doing a deep dive. All information should be working in the same way. All evidence should be corroborating, as they call it. But if it's contradictory, you've got to go and have a look at why and make up your mind. As I said, if you realise that management bias is likely, then you've got to go and challenge all the assumptions behind whatever it is that they've given you. All pretty obvious stuff, really. And then the final thing I want to look at in terms of audit evidence recap is the challenges that you'll face as an auditor. So tight deadlines, if that's in the scenario, always talk about the quality of the audit. Make sure that you get enough sufficient and appropriate evidence and that you're not swayed by these tight deadlines. Complex estimates, make sure that you've got enough evidence for that, particularly when you're looking for things like fair value accounting or, so the fair values of buildings, the fair values of intangibles. Really difficult, make sure you get experts in, that sort of thing. Digital evidence, just be careful nowadays that, we're going to be auditing within the computer and over-reliance on automation, on AI, that sort of thing. Make sure that you've still got sufficient and appropriate evidence.